Peace in our time or Munich 2.0, Trump's Ukraine deal. What's the deal? The boy who cried coup. What's the truth behind Guinea-Bissau's recent political overthrow? The coup of the game. Period. Many question marks surrounding the period. Can India's menstrual leave regulation backfire and actually hurt women? And bye-bye fillers. Hello, fish sperm, the latest cosmetic craze. Sounds a bit crazy. Did we finally find a fountain of youth in the pond? But before we get to all of this and so much more, we're eyeing the globe's biggest stories. Soft power, hard neighborhood. Pope Leo boarded a Shepherd 1 for Beirut, preaching peace while everyone else pledged war. Lebanon, broken, shell-shocked, still lines with flags betting a 70-year-old American Pope can do what ceasefires can. He'll pray at the blessed port, skip the bombed-out south, and thread his convoy through Hezbollah turf without pretending it's a pilgrimage to Disneyland. Flying white cassock in a target zone, the pontiff's speech. Don't abandon hope or each other, even if your government and your peace prospects already did. Hope dies last. Well, crossing oceans now. AfD resurrects a youth wing as Generation Germany, and the young leader is using familiar sentiment to play this old new generation.
We are German patriots who always ask ourselves first what serves Germany and the interests of our citizens, and we act accordingly. That was the case in the past, it is the case now, and it will continue to be the case in future government responsibility.
AfD riding for a while now as the anti-establishment force at a time of low trust in politicians, with a strong anti-migration campaign, finishing second in Germany's national elections back in February. It is now the country's biggest opposition party. 5 of Germany's 16 states hold regional elections next year. 2 of those are in the ex-communist East, where the AfD is number 1. And from human force to the force of nature, Sumatra floods claim 442 lives in a rare cyclone Sanyar. Homes vanish, hundreds missing, road severed. The official death toll in Thailand currently sits at 170, keeps on rising, with deaths reported in Malaysia as well. Millions affected in the region. Monsoons exacerbated by tropical storms have caused some of the worst flooding in years across Southeast Asia. Elsewhere in Asia, Sri Lanka has been battered by Cyclone Ditwa, which killed at least 193 people, more than 200 missing. So nature is trying to tell us something. We're too busy listening, and then it speaks louder. And farewell to the Queen of the Zoo, a member of the first batch of Galapagos tortoises to arrive at the San Diego Zoo, died last week. Grandma made the transfer a century ago between 1928 and 1931, thought to be in her 40s. At the time of her arrival, her age is estimated to be at 141, which would have made her the oldest living animal at the legendary zoo. She outlived over 20 presidents, 2 world wars, pandemics, from black and white photos to viral fame, loving lettuce and cactus. May you rest in peace, family. All right, now we've reached the summit. So we want to welcome tonight our dear guest from Ukraine. Joining us, journalist and author Ilya Ponomarenko from the U.S. Joining us, senior fellow at the America First Policy Institute, Fred Flates. And here in our Jaffa studios, international analyst Dan Perry. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. So peace in our time or Munich 2.0. What's the real deal with Trump's Ukraine deal? Before we unpack, let's take a deeper look.
A peace plan or a piece of appeasement. Ukrainian officials are meeting with their American counterparts today in order to iron out the details in President Trump's 28-point peace plan. Some of the points are beneficial to Ukraine, including frozen Russian assets to be spent on rebuilding Ukraine and promises that Russia will not attack anymore. But in return, they must give up some land that Russia took over and vow not to join NATO. This plan caused controversy before it was released, as it is alleged that the document was originally written in Russian by the Russians. So is this deal just Russian plans in Trumpian clothing, or is it fair to all parties? Could this lead to the end of the war, or, like the 2014 Minsk agreements, will it just postpone the inevitable? How will this deal impact the rest of Europe and the world as a whole? Should both sides accept Trump's peace plan?
All right, so let's get to it. Should both sides accept Trump's peace plan? As always, we begin with a quick fire round, 30 seconds each to lay out your initial stance, and we pick up the debate from there. So, Ilya Ponomarenko, please take the lead. Your 30 seconds are
on. You were very correct in asking the question and mentioning the word deal, and also mentioning the phrase of both sides. The one giant problem behind all these talks and deliberations about possible peace deal between Ukraine and Russia, mediated by the West, by the US, is that many people contemplating the odds of this are not seriously thinking about the very core issue behind this. Is there a real deal that Russia would be willing to set? And a second very core issue that lies at the very basement of this, what Russia or what the US, what the Ukraine is suggesting, will it actually bring peace in the very end?
right.
The giant problem in this is this: all these numerous plans, all these numerous ultimatums, they do not answer the ultimate question: who told you that by giving up land, by giving up the defensive lines,
you will actually reach peace? We will get to all of this deeper and wider in a second. Just to conclude the opening round, Mr. Fleet, your thoughts?
That was a very biased setup by an anti-Trump reporter. It's now a 19-point peace plan. Zelensky has said he's inclined to sign it. He has some differences that have to be worked out. The problem right now is Putin does not want peace, does not seem to be serious about negotiating this. Trump does want peace. He's working very productively with the Ukrainians, but I think we're going to need substantial pressure on Vladimir Putin to get him to the negotiating table to agree to what has to be done to stop this war.
Last but not least, Dan Perry, your thoughts? Your 30 seconds are on.
The 28-point plan originally proposed and basically written by Russia was a total non-starter that was, to many people, reminiscent of the disgraceful Munich Agreement of 1938. That will go nowhere. The 19-point plan, which went through Ukrainian revisions, is more plausible, I think, to the Ukrainians and the Europeans, even though that, too, contains painful concessions by Ukraine. There is a lot to be said about the details, but the bottom line is I don't think there's any chance that Putin currently will accept anything acceptable to Ukraine and to the Europeans. It reminds me a little bit of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in that one side's maximal give does not meet the other's minimal demand.
And yet, in this respect, Trump was able to make both sides here, at least in the Middle East, to sign this agreement, and only later on faced with the actual ramifications of it. Gentlemen, please feel free to interrupt.
Overall, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, not the Gaza war.
Of course. Please feel free to interact from this point onwards, gentlemen. So indeed, we're seeing this modus operandi, if you will, of the Trump administration of manifestation diplomacy, signing an agreement first and then seeing how it translates underground. Maybe it is feasible. Maybe it is not a non-starter, Mr. Ponomarenko.
It is a non-starter, not a non-starter for Ukraine at all. I mean the modified plan, the 19-point plan. We are talking about realistic things. We are talking about, be it Ukraine stopping where it is, be it Ukraine saying no to its NATO aspirations. But then again, we get back to the very core questions that remain unanswered. Who told anybody that by disarming Ukraine, by not providing super stable security guarantees, by ceding lands, by making all those painful concessions that we're talking about, it will not be used by Russia within a pretty short period of time to resume war in an even better position and to make even more catastrophic consequences on Ukraine.
Can I step in for a second? You ask who said that. Everyone said that. There's no disputing that there's a global there's global concern about appeasing a dictator and giving in the way that there was the failed attempt to appease Hitler 87 years ago. Everyone knows that is a big potential problem. But my question to you is other. Even the second plan that seems palatable to Ukraine, I think, though Ukraine may not have to recognize Russia's dominion over the ceded land, would cede some land to Ukraine. Now, it's to Russia. It's fairly clear to me that there will be no agreed end to the war with Russia, short of demolishing Russia's army, which would require a whole new modus operandi, that will not involve Ukraine ceding some land. So the tough question to you, for me at least, is do you agree that the front lines right now can be the basis for a new border? I know how painful that is. And everyone knows that that itself risks being appeasement. We also know it's not enough for Putin. Do you agree with what Zelensky seems to agree? I think he does. It's hinted that that would be potentially a way forward, albeit not enough for Putin.
I do agree with what you said, that it's a realistic possible peace plan based on concessions, even painful concessions from Ukraine, no doubt about that. And I'm not saying these words very lightly because what we are talking is my own, for instance, homeland. I'm originally from Donbass, so if we have this, chances are very high that I'm not going to see the land of my parents again. Again, one giant problem here is that on the other side of the front line, it's a non-starter. Nobody cares about concessions. Nobody cares about from the Kremlin side, from the Russian side. Nobody cares about what kind of concessions could finally, stabilize the front line and get the situation resolved. The problem is that on the Russian side, there are absolutely zero reasons to stop in their position and stop the war. Zero reasons. Unfortunately.
Well, maybe every soldier killed and every ruble lost constitute a reason. And if it becomes painful enough, and I would argue, especially on the economic sanctions side, the reasons may accumulate.
True. This is what we were really hoping for 3 years ago, 4 years ago when it was starting. We were absolutely sure that with all this staggering losses that Russia has suffered, with all this economic toll that they have to endure all this time, they just can't help but stop it because it's way beyond any point of madness. The price that they pay, especially given their gains of all these years. Unfortunately, it doesn't work this way.
Well, there's clearly more that can be done. To me, there's a whole series of steps that you can take.
Mr. Fred Floyds, please chime in. So with all of this laid out very clearly, we can now talk about the clauses. So demilitarized zones with no monitors, troops caps with no enforcement, overseen by who? The nits and bits of this mechanism of this deal are very vague, and I'm being generous.
I think Trump's objective is to replicate the success of his peace plan that ended the war in Gaza and got all the hostages out. The main objective of that plan was to get the living hostages out. There was an understanding that there would be aspects of the plan would have to be negotiated later. What Trump wants to do in the war in Ukraine is to stop the killing with an immediate ceasefire, with an understanding that aspects of this ending this conflict can't be resolved at this time. If Trump could get that, an agreement where the fighting would stop and there would be negotiations, that might be the best possible outcome. I don't think Putin is there yet, and it will take substantial pressure on him to get there. But I also think we see another dynamic in what's been happening lately, and that is making it clear to the Ukrainians that the end of this war is going to be ugly and will be painful. And they have to decide how much pain are they prepared to endure. They're not going to kick Russia out of its territories. It's not going to be a just peace. But the best solution we can get is to stop the killing and to make sure Russia doesn't invade again. And Trump is going to try to do some deal making to get this happen. And I think Zelensky understands now that he will have to agree to an imperfect, painful peace. But we're not quite there on what he'll agree to or getting Putin to negotiate.
And yet, if we learn anything, is that the lack of war is not necessarily peace, right? Even when there's an agreement involved. Dan Perry.
Yeah, know,
No, I know. We're looking at an armistice like
Yeah,
Korea.
of course.
That
of
means
course,
there won't be a
of course.
war. There'll
Yeah.
be a very tenuous peace.
I've read what you've written and spoken of recently, and it's clear to me that you're not a person who's inclined to sell out Ukraine the way Trump so often sounded like he was. But at the same time, it seems to me like you're defending Trump's approach, and that really fascinates me. I would challenge you. How can you defend Trump's approach that began in early February of this year, where he was suggesting that not Putin but Zelensky is the dictator, where he was suggesting Ukraine started the war? Throughout this process, the very fact that he's willing to sign on to the 28-point Russian plan that included ridiculous nonsense like that Ukraine was promoting Nazism, and that called on Ukraine to hold new elections within 100 days, but had no parallel demand of Russia, that is truly a dictatorship. Are you not discomfited by whatever it is that is driving Trump's approach to occasionally take him to a place where he looks so wrong? Is that somehow good negotiation? I'm genuinely fascinated.
Trump's approach has always been to stop the killing. He said this in 2019 when fake news journalists like you weren't pressing Joe Biden to stop the war. Trump has always wanted to stop the war and to stop the killing. We didn't see any effort by Biden whatsoever to do this. Now, there's been conflict between Zelensky and Trump. There's no doubt of that. And why that has happened is because Zelensky did not want to support a partial solution, an imperfect solution. He wanted a complete solution, or Russian troops would pull out of Ukraine. And Trump's position is that's impossible. I think Trump's unfortunately probably right. And I'm glad Zelensky and Trump are now working together. I think there's been things said on both sides that maybe shouldn't have been said. But if we're going to be taking pot shots at each other, let's talk about Joe Biden and how he caused this conflict by his incompetent policies.
You know, I must say, first of all, I take exception to call me fake news journalist. I don't know how much you know of me, and it's offensive. I didn't attack you. Putting that aside, and I legitimately wanted to know how you view whatever, is there a method in what looks like madness? Putting that aside, I cannot fathom what you want with Biden. Would you have preferred that Biden not do anything to arm Ukraine, that Biden not lead a Western effort to sanction Russia, at least to the partial degree that has been done? To the extent that Biden enabled the war to continue, so does Trump. Unless you want Ukraine to be completely eviscerated, you have no choice but to give them, to some degree, the tools of stopping Russia's aggression. You must accept that we're talking here about naked aggression. So to appease it is obviously clearly wrong. I assume you know about the Munich Agreement and you know what happened thereafter. And I furthermore rather suspect that we could agree, you and I, that probably if Putin cannot be brought to heel, then what we need now is a ratcheting up of the Western posture and American posture vis-a-vis Russia. And I'm talking, of course, about secondary sanctions on banks doing business with Russia, about a complete shutdown of their LNG, about no insurance policies for Russian exports, about measures against Turkey and China for trading with Russia. The menu is known; it hasn't been tried, and I assume that's where we're headed.
Well, I think it's pretty clear now that the failure to give Ukraine the weapons it needed before Russia invaded, or to provide Ukraine the weapons it needed just after Russia invaded, is why the war started and why it got worse. And when people argue that we are encouraging aggression by allowing Russia to get away with this, that's exactly right. That happened under Biden. Trump has to clean up the mess that Biden and the Europeans created because they didn't give Ukraine the weapons it needed before Russia invaded. I remember Biden saying that he would tolerate a minor incursion of Ukraine by Russia. He encouraged this invasion. He encouraged it by his incompetence, by statements like that. Trump's trying to clean up an impossible situation. And frankly, it's much more complicated than he realized. I think that he's making progress in getting European states and Ukraine to work with him. But I think the process to get Russia on board is going to be a lot harder. I agree with a lot of the things that you said. I agree with secondary sanctions. I want to see real pressure on China to abide by American energy sanctions, I think will give us a lot of leverage against Putin. But Putin is a fanatic. He doesn't see Ukraine as a separate country. He doesn't see Ukrainians as separate people. Given how irrational he is, he will have to feel real pain until he negotiates in earnest. I think that's what
we will expand our conversation in a second when it comes to the greater ramifications on Europe and the world. But let's say for another minute with what's happening in Ukraine, Putin is obviously an issue, Ilya Ponomarenko. But what about Zelensky? You know, wartime leaders rarely survive. Is Zelensky at this point in time an obstacle to peace, to moving forward?
You know, contrary to very popular imagination on this, Zelensky is not numbered by a million men in uniform fighting this war right now, here and now, and deciding to stay and fight for this. He's not controlling them by remote controller. So what's really the factor here is the Ukrainian people who choose to fight and defend the country against Russia. So there are not millions of Zelenskys in uniforms fighting. It's the Ukrainian people who do this, especially people in the uniform. When it comes to his post-war, possible post-war life, my personal opinion is that I truly believe, I hope that he'll be wise enough to step down and open a new page in the country's history if we're destined to have it. But, you know, life is a bit more complicated than that, as we have seen this. So he's not the obstacle. The people making the choice is the obstacle to this, to this so-called peace.
Yeah, life is complicated and no war is just what it is, especially not this one. So what does it mean for Europe and the world, for that matters? Let's take a listen and we pick up the debate from there.
All this work is ultimately about ensuring that Russia never attacks again. The European Union will always support peace. We are in favor of any peace plan that will bring a just and lasting peace for Ukraine, but also ensures the security for Europe tomorrow. If we want this to not happen again, if we want this not to continue and go any further, then we need to have a just and lasting peace. I will fight for this as long as I can, because I really think that this is a matter of bigger picture of European security as well. If aggression pays off, it will be, you know, it will serve as an invitation to use aggression again and use it also elsewhere.
All right, gentlemen, another quick fire round, and we pick up the debate from there. Is Trump gifting Europe with the most valuable gift ever, a wake-up call? Mr. Fred Fleitz, you take the lead. Your 30 seconds are on.
I think he has. And what we just heard, that we'd be rewarding aggression, that we have to get a lasting and just peace. I think we're going to get a lasting peace eventually, but it's not going to be just. I hope one day when Putin leaves the political scene, we can negotiate a peace that's fully just for Ukraine. But realistically, for the foreseeable future, the objective is to stop the killing and to get the best peace we can. And I think Trump's people have been effective in making that case to the Europeans and Zelensky, although they don't like to admit it publicly.
Dan Perry, your thoughts?
I agree that it's a wake-up call for Europe, for sure. Whether it's intended by Trump as a gift is something I'm skeptical about. I just think Trump is recklessly indifferent to the transatlantic alliance that brought peace and prosperity to much of the world after World War II. And indeed, he's indifferent to the entire liberal world order. He's trying to rip it to pieces, but it has the effect of reminding the Europeans that it is time that they grew up and were accountable for their own defense and stopped relying to such an outrageous degree on the U.S. So I don't think it's on purpose, but it has a felicitous effect.
Well, intentions and results are not necessarily aligned most of the times. Mr. Ilya Ponomarenko, your 30 seconds are on. Your take.
I absolutely do agree with the fact that President Trump's approach and in general his policy in this regard, we might be extremely critical of what he's doing on the global stage. But one of the positive effects of that is the shock that Europe has had over these last years, especially when it comes to the last 6-8 months, and truly the wake-up call. I can't say from our perspective what we see from inside Ukraine that Europe has used 100%, all 100%, or what should have used in terms of getting rid of this mindset of the past epoch of global security order. But there was a wake-up call, but we're not quite there yet, unfortunately.
Not quite there yet, gentlemen. Please feel free to interact from this point onward. So, Dan Perry, where are we heading? What is the signaling here to Europe, and also, hello to China, hi to others that are taking a close look at what is currently unfolding? Where are we heading?
Well, first of all, Europe in the past several years has taken real steps to increase its military expenditure and become less dependent, as I say, on the U.S., but also to wean itself to a degree off Russian oil and natural gas. Of course, they're getting some anyway, circuitous routes through Azerbaijan and elsewhere, but they've made the effort. That effort takes them in a good direction as regards no longer depending on Russia. That dependence on a dictatorship that in no way is a good faith player in the world was always a bad idea. But the Germans were particularly guilty of furthering it, Schroeder in particular. And we see now a walking back of that mistake. I do suspect very strongly that a negotiated deal, much as Trump would want one, it may not be possible. It's conceivable that Fred is right. And in the end, someone will blink and some version of a ceasefire that doesn't actually nail down the details, but just ends the shooting, might happen. If it doesn't happen, I have to note that, as I predicted, Fred agrees with me. Probably there will be a need to ratchet up the pressure on Putin. Economically in particular, there is no reason for Russian banks to not be completely thrown out of the SWIFT system. There is no reason for trade with Russia to not be the subject of very severe primary and secondary and tertiary sanctions. All of that needs to happen to make clear to Putin, assuming indeed he doesn't blink, that the cost of the war to him is prohibitive. Now, I know that Russia's not a democracy and that many of the opposition-minded people have left. And much of the hinterland is ill-informed because TV and media is controlled by Putin. But there's a limit. In the end, when something is so horrible, when a government is so horrible to its own people, it does tend to collapse.
Mr. Floyd, are we nearing this point that Dan Perry is describing, that pressure will be directed at Putin?
I hope so. There's so much more Europe could be doing. Europe is complaining that the Trump administration has cut it out of the talks, but there's so much it could be doing. It could stop buying energy from Russia. It could put pressure on China and India to stop buying Russian energy. It could stop making counterproductive proposals like it wants to put European ground troops as peacekeepers in Ukraine after there's a peace settlement. I would love it if that was possible. Putin will never agree to that. And every time the French and British leaders mention that, it makes a peace agreement harder to achieve. I'd like to see European leaders try to meet with Putin, put pressure on Putin, something they didn't bother to do before Trump was in office. There's a lot more they can do, and I think that would help because this really has to be a team effort. The U.S. can't do it alone, and Europe complaining that it's being left out is not helping.
Fred, the pro-Trump crowd in America just loves to dump on the Europeans. Let me ask you, is it not conceivable that when the Europeans put forth positions that Putin is unlikely to accept, that is their version of negotiation, a little bit analogous to ridiculous Trumpisms like calling Zelensky a dictator? Negotiation, right?
I mean, we had 4 years when Biden was president, and we had no effort by the Europeans to engage the Russians to try to get them to stop the war. Why is that? Because they signed on to this ridiculous idea, let's just dump weapons endlessly on Ukraine, and somehow the war will end. This was basically virtue signaling by the elite, the elite in Europe, the elite in the United States, and it made the situation in Ukraine much worse. Trump rejects that. I think Europe is with him now. I think Zelensky is with him now. That's what we should be talking about.
Well, I think we all have to agree, though, that the Europeans and the Americans did not provide Ukraine with all the weapons needed to win the war. I mean, obviously, you could still provide them with more cruise missiles, more long-range missiles, more F-16s, more Patriot batteries. There's a lot, the long-range drones. They've been denied all this. So I think to paint a picture as if he just threw weapons at Ukraine and the war went on and they failed to win it, I think is a little bit economical with the truth, frankly.
Mr. Ponomarenko, please chime in.
Again, I'm not see, and it's a very simplistic approach to just contemplate various things that could truly provide a stable, a tangible peace for Ukraine, and just throw it out at every single step as inconceivable or unrealistic. Russia doesn't want European peacekeepers or European forces to support Ukraine's defense effort. Unrealistic, impossible. That's counterproductive. I mean, Ukraine wants to have the best possible weaponry in its access to be able to be a target, way too dangerous to be attacked again. Unconceivable, impossible, because Putin would not accept this. In the end, with such an approach, we end up simply saying that there's no problem in the war when Ukraine dies out and gets erased from the map.
Yeah,
That's not the solution. The problem is, at the core of this, is that making Ukraine die out and be erased from the map is not a solution. It's not a peace. Excuse me, gentlemen.
Well, but Ilya, even Trump doesn't necessarily want that. I mean, I can't explain his flip-flops, but the new plan, rewritten by Ukraine, which is also an American plan in a sense, I agree with all of you that it's not going to, win support from Russia. But that is now America's position, apparently, and that new plan does guarantee Ukraine's existence. Of course, it also involves a fast track to the EU, which is wonderful. It no longer caps Ukraine's military to 600,000 soldiers, as the previous Russian-written plan did. In other words, I don't see where you need to be so afraid that the West wants to dismember Ukraine. The current plan on the table, in fact, is reasonable for Ukraine, notwithstanding the loss of your home region, for which I have a lot of sympathy, obviously.
It is what you are 100% true and right when it comes to you saying that it's reasonable, it's possible, it's realistic, etc., etc. The ultimate Ukrainian goal in such a war, in this circumstances, is the national survival as an independent state. It is possible without certain region if we end up surviving as an independent democratic country that is moreover capable of defending itself to the necessary point. It's 100% true. It's realistic. Again, we get back to who told you that Putin is going to like this.
All right, gentlemen, I have a feeling that this debate will be continued. But at this point in time, we will thank you very much for joining us tonight. Fred Flate, Ilya Ponomarenko, and Dan Perry. Thank you all, gentlemen, very much for joining us tonight. We appreciate your time, your insight. See you on the next round of the summit. Thank you very much. And now we want to put the spotlight on these stories. Let's go on. Putting the spotlight now on this. Karnataka has just made history, offering paid menstrual leave to all working women in both government and private sectors. 1 day off per month, no question asked, no doctor's note required. Modern policy or workplace minefield. We want to turn now live to Indian economist Ekta Kumar. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Alex.
So 12 extra paid days off, right, per year. Critics are dubbing it operational loss. How do you respond to someone who thinks that your uterus is a liability on a balance sheet?
You're putting it very dramatically, Ellen, but if I have to then, in which case, reply in terms of numbers. The women labor force participation in India is very low. And there have been enough studies and more that highlight the fact that I think the recent one was a McKinsey report, which said that even if you increase it by 10%, that's it. I mean, currently it's at about 33, as per the government records. In the organized sector, I'm saying, not the unorganized sector.
Yeah.
And if you were to increase it even marginally, it's going to have a huge impact on the GDP, right? A 10% increase means about 70 million women will join the workforce.
Wow.
So you're putting it, and that will again have like hundreds of billions of dollars. I think it's about 700, that number. That's how much our GDP will go up.
Right.
So even if you have to put it as dramatically as looking at the balance sheet, I think it's a win-win situation.
So, some women are actually scared to take this leave because they don't want to seem weak or less professional. We fought for this right, and now we're, to an extent, too afraid to use it. What does that say about where we actually are?
I mean, that is true. I'm guessing for you as well, and for me as well. I mean, we've all gone to work with discomfort, with a bit of pain, thinking, of course, you can't take a day off, unless I'm dying in pain, of course, I can't. So I think this is such a landmark judgment because what it's doing really is saying menstruation is not a personal problem anymore.
Right.
It becomes a workplace issue. And that whole mindset, for that to change, I think that is the significance of this ruling. And yes, you're right. And of course, women are hesitant. And of course, they will be. I mean, changes like this take time. But I think this is the step in the right direction. And frankly, I think it need not be limited to a state. I think it's about time. There has been a lot of kind of groundwork being done on this by gender activists, by, but it's been a part of the larger conversation of workplace inclusion and all of that. But I think it's about time you also think of a national policy framework to address this, because what is critical here is that companies need clear guidelines. For something like this, and I have to highlight this, just a couple of days ago, in the state that I'm in, in a university, there were 3 sanitation workers who were asked to actually prove that they were having their periods, which is absolutely ridiculous. And this is when you realize that laws like this are important and absolutely critical to normalize what is in our country.
Ms. Kumar, here's the uncomfortable question, but we need to get at it, so to speak. Could this actually hurt women's hiring prospects? Because if you're a company choosing between 2 equally qualified candidates, right, and one comes with 12 guaranteed days off, are we setting ourselves up to be quietly passed over?
Right. It's a very valid question, Elle. And we, in India as well, we've been talking about this. Is this move progressive? Is it symbolic? Or can it actually backfire? And honestly, you're hoping it doesn't. But the fact is that a hiring manager will look at you and say, she's not going to be around, but he is.
Right.
Or, in any case, we're struggling with things like, oh, she'll get married and go, and oh, she's getting pregnant and going, and now she's going to get her periods and she'll be off. But hopefully, and again, this is a step forward, but I think this needs a little more nuanced approach as well in the longer term.
Right.
Because it not one day does not solve the issue. You need to have companies who are okay with remote working, with flexible hours maybe, or even something as simple as, hygienic facilities in office.
It's not seeing it as a problem, but rather as something that is part of life, and it all connects to the history in India in this respect. Doesn't come in a void.
Yes, absolutely. 25% of girls in school drop out when they start their periods. I mean, it's shocking if you think about it. Why would you stop an education, right?
Right.
And sometimes it's as simple as there isn't like a safe, clean toilet in school. So these are practical, on-the-ground problems that we, and especially, and which is why this is such an important judgment, because it's also reducing structural barriers to entry. We talked about women labor participation in the workforce, and this kind of addresses that structural bottleneck as well.
So many question marks surrounding this period, right?
Yeah, but it's a step forward. Again, in our country, there's so much.
Progress is not linear. It's about embracing complexity, not trying to solve it. Indian columnist Ekta Kumar, always a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much for this. Thank you. And now to the boy who cried coup. What's the truth behind Guinea-Bissau's recent political overthrow? The coup of the game, if you will. We head now to Ricardo Sousa, international relations expert, joining us live from Portugal. Thank you very much for your time. Well, walk us through what actually happened Wednesday. Soldiers on TV, gunshots in Bissau, Ambalo detained, then fleeing. Genuine military takeover or this stage political theater? Any basis for this for this theory of a simulated coup?
Good night. Well, peaceful and competitive presidential and parliamentary elections were held on the 23rd of November, just a few days ago, with a voter turnout of about 65% of the country's nearly 1 million voters. 2 days later, on the 26th of November, the ballots were tallied, and unofficial results, I must state unofficially, indicated a clear victory for Fernando Dias with about 55% of the vote, defeating the incumbent president, Umaro Sissoco Embaló.
Right.
this result, if confirmed, would have eliminated the need for a second electoral round in the elections. On the same day, before the official announcement that was planned for the 27th, for the day after, gunfire was heard in the capital and a coup was declared. General Horta Intaya assumed the presidency and announced a one-year transitional period to restore stability. And members of the opposition were detained, and supposedly Sissoko Embalo was also arrested. However, evidence suggests that this was a staged coup designed to prevent the publication of the election results.
So one prefers a coup rather than an election loss.
Certainly, I mean, yes, all the military officers that are involved in this coup were very close with personal or political ties to the Sissoko Embalo. And also, in particular, we have both local and international observers that were on the ground and could characterize this coup as fabricated or staged. In particular, we have Goodluck Jonathan, a former president of Nigeria, that was part of the joint AU-ECOWAS election observer mission, and that described this event, and he was on the ground, as a ceremonial coup orchestrated by the head of state himself. So 3 days ago now, 27th of November, Sissoko Embalo, supposedly arrested, but he was able to travel to Senegal, but he didn't find favor in Senegal, and Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko publicly criticized his conduct and suggested that the coup had been staged. Sissoko Embalo subsequently relocated to Brazzaville on the 29th of November in the Republic of the Congo, ruled since 1997 by Denis Sassou Nguesso, with whom he's known to have a personal and political relationship.
So helping one leader helping another leader, but you know it is not happening in a void. 9 coups since 1974. What is this structural rot, if you will, that makes Guinea-Bissau a coup factory?
Yes, I mean, you are right. Guinea-Bissau has long been plagued by political instability. Several coups d'etat, political assassinations, a civil war in 1998-99. I mean, this civil war really not only destroyed the physical infrastructure in the country, but also destabilized all the political consensus that could be developed and weaken all its institutions. So Guinea-Bissau is characterized by very weak institutions and with indicators of economic and social well-being way below the average in the region in West Africa. So as an example, in 2023, GDP per capita was approximately $840, about half of what is registered in the countries in the region.
Right.
There is another dimension that since 2005, a new dynamic added to this already compounded, to these already precarious conditions. The growing influence of the narco-traffic networks that use Guinea-Bissau as a major transshipment hub on the route from Latin America to Europe.
Yeah, officially declared narco state, so to speak. Paraphrasing on the long-time phrase, better to burn out than fade away, I suspect it is also better to be ousted in a staged coup than to lose in elections, right? Ricardo Sosa, unfortunately, this is all the time we have, but to be continued, right? An ongoing saga and the whereabouts of ousted President Malou still unclear. Thank you so very much for taking the time to clear the clutter and explain the current and potentially the future state of affairs. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to this. Say goodbye, fillers. Hello, fish sperm. The latest cosmetic craze sounds a bit crazy, but did we finally found the fountain of youth in the fish pond? Maybe. Dr. Dan Regev, Vice Head of Plastic Surgery Department at the Rabin Medical Center. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Regev. So before we unpack, what is it that we're actually unpacking? Actual fish sperm?
No, a marketing term.
Uh-huh.
Actually, exactly, yeah. This is a marketing term because we do not have a sperm of a salmon inside. We use a fragmented, purified DNA and that's what we inject. We do not inject stem cells or any kind of cell into the human skin, especially.
So you're diving right to it, and pun very much intended, because we're seeing treatments go viral before the clinical trials even catch up, even before those alleged natural stem cells or placenta extracts, and now fish sperm. At what point does the aesthetics industry, become a giant unregulated experiment on people's faces?
Well, this is a critical question. Actually, there is no good regulatory interface between the materials. Some of them actually are what we can say marketing of biostimulators, but there are no real medicine. This is why. Mm-hmm. So actually it is a market that gone wild, like the Wild West, and we can see many things there, like the salmon fish, for example. So there is no real good regulation concerning the injectables and the fillers. We used to do it, we try to do it, you try to do it now, but again, the regulation is very, very hard.
So it's not actually medicine gaining momentum, it's just luxury skincare with a better marketing story?
Exactly.
Wow.
Well, the industry, exactly. The industry goes faster than the medical investment, the medical proofs. And this is why we are very concerned about it, okay? We do not like to see some things injected inside our skin. We do not know exactly what kind of things we insert there. So use it with very, very caution, okay? It's not something that they say, okay, I'm gonna do it, it's gonna be fine.
The latest trend.
Don't know it.
Yeah. So in this respect, Dr. Reva, you've seen decades of aesthetics and aesthetic trends come and go. Is our obsession with intervention accelerating, or are we moving forward to a future that, not modifying your face is the outlier, or does every generation think they've, invented the fountain of youth?
The holy grail of the fountain of youth, yes. Well, every generation thinks like that, but only few materials sustain. For example, the botulinum toxin, for example, the hyaluronic acids. So the salmon fish is yet to be proved. It takes time, of course.
And until you get proof, you pay a lot of money to experiment. All right, Dr. Dana Regev.
Luxury versus medicine. This is not the same.
Well, thank you very much for helping us differentiate between what actually counts as medicine and what is very fair, but yet in the frameworks of luxury skincare. Thank you very much, Dr. Dan Regev. We appreciate your time and insight. Thank you, sir. All right, before we say goodbye, we all need to take a deep breather after this day, right? So I want you to meet the hottest chick in town. Yes, she's stunning, single, and ready to mingle. Meet Astoria, Manhattan's only wild turkey, tragically alone. All those dating apps aren't doing much, apparently. She flew from Queens to downtown's Battery Park, possibly looking for love. Problem is, hundreds of eligible male turkeys live on Staten Island, but turkeys can barely fly a few hundred feet, let alone the 5 miles across the harbor, right? Men! Astoria hasn't figured out the ferry system yet, so she spends her days eating weeds, and dodging unleashed dogs and laying unfertilized eggs she refuses to abandon. Sounds very familiar. Well, she cannot be tamed. She is single, and when you're in Manhattan, you don't need a man, right? Live your best life, Astoria. All right, this is it from us for tonight, but see you next week right here on Global. I thank you very much for joining.